Hi, and welcome to the Bootleg Book Club. My name is Sam.
And I'm Felicia.
This week, our pick is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. We specifically chose this book for Pride Month as it is an LGBTQ young adult romance. However, before we jump into what we usually discuss about our book picks, I did want to go ahead and have us announce our giveaway winner. I want to say thank you to everyone who participated, and specifically thank you to those who follow the rules, because I'm just going to say not all y'all follow the rules, and yeah. But let's announce our winner.
Yes!
Who is it?
The winner is Jessie Monser, and we'll be reaching out to you very shortly. And we just want to say again, thank you so much for participating. We really appreciate all the love we've had so far, and we're so excited to keep on going, right?
Yep, that's right.
Okay,
so let's jump into our book pick. So our author, Leah Johnson, was raised on the west side of Indianapolis, Indiana. She went on to be the editor-in-chief of her high school's newspaper, as well as a tennis player and a member of the show and concert choir. While she was in college at Indiana University, she interned at the Wall Street Journal, as well as other news outlets. She received her master's in fine arts in fiction writing from Sarah Lawrence College, and she currently lives in Brooklyn. Her first novel is You Should See Me as a Crown. This was her debut novel, and she actually says that it helped her with accepting her own queer identity. This book was chosen as a Stonewall Honor Book, the first ever Reese's Book Club for young adult pick, and named a Best Book of the Year by Amazon, Kirkus, Marie Claire, Publishers Weekly, and New York Public Library. Like, this book has won several awards. In 2021, Time named it as one of the 100 best young adult books of all time. And Leah, in addition to writing novels, she writes essays and cultural criticisms in magazines such as Teen Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Cosmopolitan. So the book cover itself, we're going to get into in our book look section. So I actually really liked this cover. Like, it kind of got my attention right off the bat, just seeing the crown. And it made me think of me back in high school, actually. Like, I was always like, I'm the princess. Like, I remember I would actually legitimately wear, like, tiny crowns in my hair at some points in time. So yeah. I of course I just love seeing young black girls on the cover of the books that we've been reading, and the natural hair. I've just been really, really appreciating that. Right. This book is 330 pages. I did the audiobook of this.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll do a mix of audiobook and reading, but I've just not that, like, this was a good book. I just have been going through so much this past month that audiobook was like the fit for me. So, but I can say that it pretty much took like only 2 days to listen, basically.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I think for me, this has been a book on my TBR because I've seen it everywhere, right? So I'm so glad we finally had the time to sit down and read this, and that this was your pick, because I was just like, it's been in the back of my mind. So now it's just like, I'm finally here. And I love the cover too. I thought of you just because it's purple, honestly, and I know purple is your favorite color.
Right.
But the title is something that really kind of caught my attention. You Should See Me in a Crown. And it goes throughout the book. It's just this sense, an idea, like, you know, for a black girl to be seen as someone, you know, of prestige, to be seen someone as someone important, someone of value, and just like the message that comes across. So of course, not only is like a black girl, but a black girl smiling, like just
joy,
happiness.
Yes,
it's something that was just that warmth is something that draws you to the book.
Right, I agree.
Yes.
So this is a young lesbian girl's coming of age story. We find out that the main character, Liz Leidy, is in her senior year, and she's waiting to see if she will be selected for a scholarship. It's to play in her dream orchestra and at her dream school. And she ultimately decides to enter her school's prom court contest, basically, because she's trying to earn the title of queen for a scholarship that comes along with that title, basically, to help her with her efforts to pay for her dream school, right? And I just found that, like, throughout the story as I was reading, there were very real challenges that she was having, like, financially, academically, just, like, and personal challenges. But it was a beautiful story in the sense that in the end, she realizes she doesn't have to face these challenges alone. And it's like you see the themes of family, friendship, and first love, and like just all coming together to like really support her in this challenge.
Yes.
So let's get started on the bookmark.
Okay. So for me, a quote that I had was slightly in the middle / towards the end. The main character, Liz, is saying, I never needed this race or a hashtag or the king to be a queen. I was born royalty. All I had to do was pick up my crown. And I'm just...
That's beautiful.
Yes, exactly.
Snap.
This realization, this, again, coming of age and knowing this, where... you didn't need this race. You didn't need the prom court to say that you are someone of value, and you don't need a king or a partner to also validate your value. She just recognizes that she has royalty, she has power, she has worth within herself. So I also really happy with Liz and the self-confidence that she builds throughout the book.
I agree. I completely agree. There's also a James Baldwin quote at the very beginning. I actually liked how several of her chapters opened with quotes in general. Yes. But I typically like when authors do that, but I have read that like a reason that they don't do that, or sometimes like publishers don't like that, is because like you have to get the rights to publish every single one of those quotes.
I did not know that.
Yes.
Okay.
So
that's a lot.
I think that I can kind of understand why like authors might not do that. But anyway.
Right.
The quote, James Baldwin quote, is, the place in which I'll fit will not exist until I make it. And I think one thing about Liz's story is she talks about not feeling like she necessarily fits in to the society, like Indiana, like, you know, small town society, I guess you could say. But she ultimately makes her own fit, her own place. Basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you want to share one more quote? I have one more quote.
Okay, sure. So I have, just because it could be worse doesn't mean you don't get to acknowledge how much it sucks, you know?
I highlighted that,
actually. And this really touched where people, I think, really like to say, you know, look on the bright side, or at least you're not this person, you know, like at least you have something. And I get it to be positive, but really it's about in the moment, I have a right to feel what I feel.
100%
and
agree.
I don't want that feeling to be bypassed. I don't want that feeling to be kind of ignored. I want it to be embraced for what it is, right? And things can be pretty shitty, you know, right? Sometimes. And just being realistic about that and having that emotion, and then being able to, you know, have the courage eventually to move on from that.
Right. So my second quote was, the grandmother, Liz's grandmother, is speaking to her, and she's saying, it's like a pretty heartfelt moment because there's a lot going on at this point in time, which we'll discuss in the deep dive. But basically she says to Liz, I'm sorry I never told you to slow down when I saw how hard you were pushing yourself. My little star, I never want to tell you not to burn as fast and as bright as you can. And I think in this moment, did you find that like heartwarming?
Yes, I did. It was something I also highlighted too. Yeah. And just the relationship she has with her grandma is something really worthwhile.
Right. I think what the challenge was going on here was that Liz was just doing so much. Like, we know she's an academic superstar. We know she's a superstar when it comes to music. and all of this stuff. And then she takes on this prom queen challenge. And it's like, I think the grandma was saying, like, I never wanted to be the one to hold you back.
Right.
And I wanted you to, like, you know, burn as bright as you can. But at the same time, I think the grandmother realizes towards the end of the book that Liz is kind of feeling some, like, legitimate burnout. And it's like, I think the grandmother never stepped in to say, it's okay to take a beat, it's okay to relax, because she didn't want to, like, be the one who was hindering her from, you know? So, like, I just feel like there's a balance there that neither of them really knew how to find, ultimately.
Right. And she even talks about that, too, in another quote I would have to find, but because they're such a close-knit family, she talks about how, the main character, Liz, she talks about how we make mistakes, but in the end, we love each other. So I think that's what showed within this relationship between the grandmother. She was trying to figure out, how do I navigate and how do I learn from this mistake through our love with each other.
Right. So, for the POV,
okay,
let's talk our favorites and least favorite characters. I will let you start.
I think my two favorite characters would be the band instructor and Mac.
Mr. K.
Mr. K,
right.
Yes. So, the band instructor, he was just kind of, I think, in the academic space that Liz is. He was just someone who was supportive, I think. She creates an entire, piece for her band to perform, and he allowed her to kind of orchestrate that. And I think
he encouraged her
in that too,
which I think is nice, because a lot of times, even if you have the talent for it, sometimes there's just, like, no one there to nurture that talent, and you can tell that he cared enough to nurture that talent too.
Exactly. So I think I was a fan of that. And then also, of course, he was there throughout the entire journey for her. You know, she figures out bad news on her college admissions, and I think he was still there for her. And even, like, through other drama that happens, he was there to actually ensure, like, because towards the end, what's happening is, like, a lot of bullying, you know, and a lot of racism and homophobia and hate. And he's also there to intercept that, I believe. And the other person is Mac, who is the love interest in the book.
I put Amanda. It's funny that I put Amanda.
Yes.
Amanda goes by her last name, Mac, but she does allow Liz to call her Amanda.
Yes. Just because I thought it was, like, a beautiful romance, just, like, the moments where she was very attentive to Liz. And I think another one of my favorite scenes was a concert scene that Mac takes Liz to. So I
wrote that
seen
down.
that. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like, how could you not love this? Like, you know, their first date / unofficial just date together, where they just connected so much. So I really like that flourishing and the connections that Mac made.
Right. So I agree with those. I also listed Liz and her family, like, her family unit, as a, like, character that I love. Like, I like their family unit, the way they worked and operated together. Mm-hmm. It was just really beautiful to read. And, like, the grandmother was clearly so attentive, and I just felt like, even in, like, those moments where the grandmother might have seemed, like, upset with her, like, I think she was late to dinner once or whatever, I just, like, there was still love in the way that she spoke to Liz, I think.
Yes.
So I really loved reading all of those scenes. And I also listed the concert scene. And with that, I'm ready to go into the deep dive, because I want to say something specific about the concert scene that I liked.
Okay.
So this is our deep dive section. We go in depth. And so that obviously means we're going to have spoilers. So this is where you can either pause the video and come back after you've read the book, or if you just want to get to know more about the book and finish up the video, keep on watching or keep on listening.
Yes.
Okay, so what I loved about the concert scene was that it wasn't just that they were going to the concert, it's that Amanda was able to surprise her with backstage passes because Amanda is cousins with one of the band members. And I just feel like you could see their connection just grow even in that moment, because it's like, not only do they both like have a passion for music because they're both part of the band, the high school band, but they also both have a passion for this specific band, which I think was named Kiltridge or something like that.
Something like that. I can't remember, honestly.
Yeah. So, and then that Amanda was able to like give her something so special. Like, I just really loved that, and that she didn't. There's a, you know, even though they had been already talking about this band, Amanda never told her, like, I can get us backstage.
Yes.
And I just
she didn't showboat.
She didn't showboat. And so,
that.
like, I just, like, everything
no
about it
dropping.
was, like, I loved. Like, everything about it I really, really loved.
Yes.
So, yeah. I really appreciated that as well, reading that.
I really liked that concert where they both connected on it, but it felt like it was a chance for Mac to bring Liz into her world. And I think their second kind of meet and greet or just togetherness, Liz was bringing Mac in her world, which was, I think, the volunteering scene. And that was like my next big scene, where Liz volunteers in a community. She goes to school in a community where it's predominantly white people. So where she volunteers, it's a predominantly black school. So she was bringing Mac, and she saw different signs of like, oh, you know, the kids are actually interested in you and you're interacting with them, and the director is giving you a job to read to the children. And those are good signs that, you know, you are a good person.
That scene was also funny to read because the whole fairy tale thing, and the kids were like, oh, you like her.
Yes.
And she was like, how do you know? And they're just like, because we watched Princess and the Frog or whatever. Anyway, it was just funny and cute, and I liked that too.
Yes, the kids knew.
The kids knew what was up, okay? I want to go into, the different themes of the book and what I found relatable. And it was things like feeling of not belonging, feelings of, you know, in that coming of age era of like end of high school, going to college, like I've noticed now that we've been reading so many books, and I mean outside of just reading for the podcast, this has really nurtured my love of books and getting back into reading in general. And the theme among coming of age stories is this idea that I never belonged in high school. You know, I never got that feeling of belonging in high school, and I'm going to get that feeling when I go to college. Like it's something's gonna click. I'll be with like-minded people, or I'll be with people in my major, or like because we all specifically got accepted to this school, like and applied and got accepted to this school, versus just like a school that we all ended up at.
Right.
Like, you know, college just feels more intentional sometimes. So like we think that's like where everything will kind of come together for us. And what I liked about this book was that, well, first of all, I could identify with that feeling, right? Like I hated high school. It's so funny now because like the few people that I actually do talk to from high school, sometimes they'll ask me about a person or a moment, and I'm just like, I legitimately can't remember. I think I've just blocked so much from that time. But I loved college, but it also was like I had hyped it up so much that I think to a certain extent it was a great time, but I think there was like some disappointment there as well in some instances. But anyway, what I liked about this book specifically was that you got to see Liz come into her own and find a way to belong while she was in high school. Like she didn't have to wait till college to find people who were in her corner, who were supportive, who, you know, all of that stuff. So that I could really, really appreciate. I could also identify with her feelings of anxiety and trying to like overcome that. And what I also am realizing about as we keep reading books and stuff is that mental health is being identified in these characters, right? Like, I think it's been where when I was growing up, at least, it was like we didn't necessarily name these feelings that we had. We just knew we felt uncomfortable.
Yes.
We just knew that, there were certain situations that we would just like feel panicky, like, but I don't know that we like named them. And what I've noticed in the books that we've been reading is that we name these feelings, and I think by giving them a name, that like might encourage people who read something like this and think, oh, I felt this way before, to like look into mental health resources and not be afraid of mental health resources.
Yes, I really like in the book how mentioning and identifying anxiety, but also stating little pieces of information, how anxiety looks different for different people. That was clearly stated, and the ways that it kind of was occurring for Liz, you see that she had a support system. She had people around her to help her manage it. And especially because it came through moments, of course, that are unexpected, and I think seeing that certain relationships that were being rekindled, or like a second chance friendship, seeing those moments was very helpful to see how, as a bystander, how can you help, in different ways, and be aware of that. I also really connected with the idea of feeling this sense of high school, a feeling that nobody wants you here, right? Not just feeling like I don't belong, but that actual people are targeting me for me to not be myself. And I think that's what Liz was getting at, and she didn't feel empowered until the very end to be herself.
Right.
And coming from a lot of people, like her childhood friend Jordan, who should have been by her side at the beginning of high school when he had the chance to be in football, he had a chance to be popular. He totally ignored when like the guys around him who were making fun of Liz of her natural hair. He acted like he didn't know her, and that was very upsetting. And that was when Liz kind of learned certain behaviors of, you know what, I'm too much, because these people, they tried to kind of ostracize me, right? And they actively make me feel completely different in a not good way.
Right.
So when it came to now it's senior year, and she's learning certain things about how I think she was waiting sometimes for permission from other people to feel involved. But again, like that James Baldwin quote of, you have to make your space, right, basically. And that's what she went out, and that's like kind of the strength she found throughout this kind of the court system of becoming queen.
Right. You mentioned Jordan, and it's funny because I just realized we talked about our favorite characters, but we didn't talk about our least favorite characters. And I have Jordan and Gabby, her other friend, in the neutral zone. Like, went from didn't like to neutral, because like Jordan, as you said, like they had that rift happen, but then they're both like vying for a spot on the prom court or whatever, right? And then like they are suddenly hanging out together again and all this stuff, and I was like, girl, you forgiving him too fast.
It started happening a bit too quick to me too.
So I was like, what is going on here? And I was like, not really feeling it. But then you learn that Jordan did try to reconcile with her, but it just didn't go as he planned. And I don't know, part of me was like, you still should have tried something else. Like, that wasn't enough.
You could have done more.
Like, you could have done more or something. But
makes total sense.
I did. So, like, I went from, like, not liking him to, okay, he's a bit more neutral. And then same thing with Gabby, because she was part of why Liz was not able to reconcile with Jordan.
Right.
And so I went from didn't like them to neutral, basically. And I put down Rachel, which is like what I would say is like the popular girl and the easy villain of the story. And I put her in least favorite, but more so I think I was like indifferent because I was like, I know she's like what her purpose is here in this story, and I also felt like at the end of the day, she didn't really owe Liz anything besides, well, kindness, of course, but she could have been kinder, of course. She didn't have to be like an evil person,
right?
But I felt like with Jordan and Gabby, like you guys are so close to her, like you kind of did owe her something, and I felt like in a way you kind of betrayed her, and so that's what made me not like them. But then move towards like a neutral space. Right. And I want to now get into, well, we can either do the F Your Fairy Tale or like the rough draft, like the difficult parts to read.
We could do rough draft because I think it connects for me to Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
I think the whole prom kind of theme was a rough for me just because I did think, okay, Rachel is the obvious villain, but just everything with prom seemed so extra. I will say my high school, we didn't have prom. We called it bash, and every year is invited, right? And we don't have a prom in king and queen or anything like that, so it was very much more inclusive, and it was just like a nice little party at the end of the year. So I just couldn't wrap my mind around like we're doing all these events, so every single time I was just like, this seems very performative just for a crown, where it was like at first it seemed like the school was trying to make it about academics too and different things like that, but then it just seemed like a big popularity contest. And I don't know. I guess maybe I just don't remember high school as much, but I just felt like that was just so weird.
I will say so because you went to like a non-traditional high school and I went to a more traditional high school. I will say like that whole thing, prom court thing, is definitely more of a popularity contest than anything else. Like all those side events don't typically happen.
Okay.
I will say that. It's typically just like a popularity contest and no one really cares beyond the like I think people might have campaigned like vote for me, like maybe had cupcakes or something like that, right. Or like, you know, like buttons or something, but it wasn't to this extent.
Yeah, because Rachel was acting like her life was about to be over. Right, and it was just like... Right.
And honestly, after prom happened, for my school anyway, after prom happened, it was so close to like graduation and all that stuff. Like you were excited about it for maybe a couple of days, but then all the seniors were just kind of like, we're out of here. Like, you know, it just, to a certain extent, just didn't really matter.
Right.
I felt like what was cringe for me, but also like hard to read, but also relatable, was the Campbell Confidential, which is like their internal social media.
Yes.
And it's like where you don't want to see your face or your name or anything about you on. And I was like, oh, this is so cringe, because like this can be really heartbreaking for students, right, to like see them on that page. But it made me think back to my high school. We actually had something like this, which is like so wild.
Mm-hmm.
But this is back in the MySpace days. There was a MySpace page called my high school's name, Confessions.
Okay, yes.
And people would send in things to it, and it was just all this drama stuff. And it was so weird for me because it was like, you don't want to be on there, but you do want to be on there, in the sense like you don't want anything negative like about you being put out there, but it was also like very obvious, like if you were on there, it was like you were popular, right? Like you were cool, like
beginning stages of social media in a phenomenon,
right?
Yeah.
But it was like cringe to read because it's like you could see how this could be really hard for people or whatever. And this was a page that the school kept trying to like get taken down, but then like somebody else would pop up with another version or whatever. But
yes,
wild stuff. Something else that was hard for me to read, just on a personal note, was like a lot of stuff that they reference as like classic or cult. It was like every like a cult movie or whatever. It was like stuff that I grew up watching. So I was like,
yes,
having to accept that, like, and I feel like this is the second time this has happened, because that happened with one of Elise Bryant's books, I believe. And I just was like, because when they talked about the Lizzie McGuire movie as being old, and I was just like, damn, I'm old, because I like, these were the movies and the shows and the things I listened to and watched growing up. So it was like, damn, like this is a classic. Okay. But yeah, so that was
Yeah, I think I'm more in the middle on that, indifferent, because I'm a zillennial, so I go in between.
Moving on. I think for me, the last thing that was kind of like difficult to read about was her brother, Robbie, going to the hospital for not taking his medicine, and Liz feeling like it was her fault, which kind of goes back to what I was talking about. Like, she had this period of burnout where, you know, she's a star in like academics and the music space. She's trying to take on the prom thing, trying to handle, you know, getting scholarship money to go to school, to go to her dream school without being a burden to her family.
Right.
But she starts to feel like she dropped the ball in being a big sister and making sure her brother was like taking his medicine.
Okay.
So that was kind of hard to read, but also just further demonstrated the deep love among the family and how they all want to be there for each other.
Yes.
I don't want to go too much into this spoiler, but like there's just a scene where I would almost call it becomes a theme of F your fairy tale, basically. Yes. And, you know, even though this is like a young love book, you know, the idea of a heteronormative fairy tale is like, it's literally like, you know, F that, you know?
Exactly.
Let's make our own love story and let's let these kids be who they truly are.
Yeah.
And I really loved that scene overall, which I'm not going to go too much into because I think that's like a really
beautiful scene to read.
Yeah,
right? For the first time.
Right.
And I agree. This was definitely a very pivotal moment in the book where Liz is growing up in a community that has she was open to her friends and her close family, but she wasn't really open, you know, about her true identity. So when it comes to the whole prom court, you know, journey, there's a part where I don't even want to follow your rules anymore. Like, I will because I need the scholarship, but I'm going to still
do it my own way.
And do it my own way.
Yeah, I'm going to stop going the traditional way of like competing for the court, and now I'm going to start competing in my own way, which I liked.
Yes, and she comes to that realization, but also I think she still had some other friends, you know, not Jordan and Gabby, who were still there for her, and of course her brother, right? Because he was also encouraging her to be on prom court, you know, to get the scholarship. So in the end, for them to really disrupt the regular narrative was something really encouraging to see.
Right. So we will wrap up with our writing wish. I think for me, it's just to a certain extent, I guess, like, I kind of wanted to know how her second audition goes. So her music teacher gets her a second audition, and
yes, he did.
It would have been nice to know how that went, even though at this point, I'm sure we get our happily ever after, and the scholarship money from getting in the orchestra doesn't make too much of a difference.
Right.
But it's just still beautiful that, like, all her dreams are coming true and more.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah. I think for me, my writing wish would be, I want her to get more credit for her music and creating and orchestrating the actual music the band plays. I don't feel like that storyline was entirely wrapped up. In the end, you get that she gets a new audition, but
because of her hard work in doing that.
Yes, because the teacher knows that she did the orchestra, but nobody else. And I feel like, well, if you've come out so far with this and your confidence, I think that would have been the next big step to take. And we don't really get that. I think that gets brushed upon just to go quickly to end the book, it felt like.
Right. Well, overall, I can definitely say I really liked this book. I was definitely surprised by it. All I knew was that it was a LGBTQ young romance, and I honestly read it and just felt like I got so much out of it, even like on a personal level, and I totally enjoyed it. So thanks to you guys for watching and listening, and please make sure you like and follow us on all of our social media platforms, and check out our website so that you guys can get our official thoughts on this book and see the review, and also we'll have the mini review up on our Instagram. Thanks again for watching, and
until we see you next time.
Right. Bye.
Bye.